So in this video, I'm going to change the way you think about injuries and how you can approach injury rehab a little bit differently to potentially what you've seen previously with other coaches or rehab specialists, and what we do at FCR to get people results, and clients do especially well once they've made this mindset shift. So with injury rehab, you've typically tried one of these two things previously. So you've either tried some form of hands-on treatment, whether that be taping, mobilizations, or acupuncture, or any other type of hands-on treatment. You either tried that, or you tried traditional rehab, either in a private or an NHS setting, which is usually like 3 to 4 exercises on a bit of paper. And usually what ends up happening from either one of these or a combination of these two directions is we end up getting into this cycle. So pain's up here. We go through an ineffective rehab process, which again is usually one of these or a combination of the two. We lose what matters. Now, what matters is down here. So what actually matters with rehab is a lot more complex, and there's a lot more going on. So for example, with ineffective rehab, we're going to lose strength, we're going to lose our movement quality, we're going to lose our load capacity, we're going to lose confidence if we just go using these methods. So that's what I mean by lose what matters. Essentially, we end up going around this cycle. So you lose what matters, you return to the sport or the activity you were doing, and then you get back in pain, and then you go round and around this circle, because like anything in life, if you try the same thing and you're not getting results, you're going to end up going around a circle unless you try a different method, and then you potentially get different results. So typically we end up going around this cycle, and again, this is usually programmed with the exercises. You're told to do 3 to 4 random exercises every day or every other day. There isn't any particular structure to the program, and there's no phases to the program. So it's not specific to the sport you're doing. It's 3 very basic exercises, and that typically just goes on and on and on. You don't really get anywhere. The reason I put all these things in here, what matters, is typically I think people think rehab is quite simple, or it's very one-dimensional, in the fact that if you go for hands-on treatment, and let's say, I haven't put massage on here, so let's say for example you go and you get a massage for lower back pain, and they say, oh, your lower back is very tight. In your head, potentially you might think, oh, that's the only reason why I have this injury, my lower back's tight. And it's more the case, we need to think a little bit more deeply. Why is it tight, and what are the reasons for this? And again, it becomes much more complex. So for example, if we take that, why is it tight? It could be any number of these things and much more. You might not be sleeping properly, getting 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep. Your nutrition might be off. You might not be doing the appropriate type of strength training for the lower back, but also other areas in the body. Are you doing a body plyometric? So are you twisting? Are you rotating through the spine and exposing not just the lower back, but the spine in general to different planes of movement and being strong in different positions? Then we've got movement quality. So I don't mean this with specific exercises, but I mean in general. Have we got fundamental basic movement patterns dialed in, whether that be throwing, running, etc., things like that, that we were designed to do as humans. Load management. So are we adjusting training volume and intensity appropriately while we're going through rehab, and potentially previously that might have affected why we've gotten injured. Our general capacity, whether that be our strength capacity, but also our cardiovascular capacity. How long have we been training for? What level are we training at? What's our weekly training volume like? All of these things. And then confidence. So again, how your brain ties into it. So how long has this injury been going on for? Are you really, really compensating with particular movement patterns? Or is it a fairly recent thing? And actually you're moving quite well, but it's just a case of focusing on other things. And there's loads more factors I could go over here, but that's kind of some of the basics. And so my point again is it's much more complex than just singular things. And one particular exercise isn't going to fix you. It's a multitude of things. And typically when people come in, they think, again, they say, oh, it's tight, it's this and that, which it is. But again, it's thinking, what's the underlying reason for this? Same thing if you went to a personal trainer and you want to get a bigger back squat. Well, it's not as simple as squatting more although a lot of PTs might tell you it is. There's a lot of other things going on. What's your movement quality like with the movement? Do you do accessories? What's your strength like? Core strength, leg strength, etc., etc. What's your back rack position like? You can go through all these different things and you can break it down into a lot more detail. So if we just move down here, so what matters, obviously, all these things, a few other bits as well, that will allow you to go from pain to performance, not in a straight line, dips and troughs, but typically it's a very complex issue and you need to have a broader mindset and focus on all these different things to get there. So what that might look like throughout the week, this is just an example of a week. So day one, we might have some breathing and mobility, 10 to 15 minutes to improve some ribcage movement and get warmed up. Then we might go into some plyometrics, again, depending if it's lower body or upper body, would depend on the injury, and then into some strength stuff. And then the length of these sessions could be anywhere from half an hour, probably up to 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the level of the client. Day two might be a little bit lighter, breathing mobility, and then some accessories. So typically some isometric holds or some hypertrophy stuff, again, specific to the goals of the sport the client is wanting to do. And then day three might be some interval conditioning, which typically in the early stages of rehab would be some off-feet stuff on the assault bike, ski erg, row erg, something where we can get the best bang for our buck in terms of training different energy systems. So if I've got a CrossFit athlete on board, we might be working in that 3 to 5 minute range with intervals, so they'd be typically a bit longer. Whereas if it was a rugby player, we might be working in that 30 to 60 second range. Again, completely depend on the sport and the person's goals. Day four would typically be a repeat of day one with some different variations of all those different things. Day five again would be slightly lighter with a repeat of breathing and mobility and then some different accessories. And then day six might be some longer zone 2 conditioning, which I typically chuck in with everyone regardless of the sport, because it's really important to build our aerobic base. So this isn't for a specific injury, this is just an example of how the week would be laid out. So I've just zoomed back out and you can see how if you go into it with the mindset of thinking it's just one or two things that need to be fixed, and it's not a particularly big issue, you can end up going around in this cycle that we spoke about: pain, ineffective rehab, you're losing what matters in terms of strength, movement quality, etc., etc., because you're not focusing on it. There's no structure to the rehab. You return to the sport or the activity and you keep going around in this cycle. Whereas if you think of rehab as training, think about it as a structured process and understand that it's going to be a longer term process, whether that be a few months or a year, potentially more than that, depending on the severity of the injury. And buying into that, you're going to get much, much better results with who you're working with. So that's typically what I do with clients in terms of just changing their mindset around injury rehab, and it's how we get people results at FCR.